sucks that I'm stuck just wearing sunglasses all the time now because people either hate it or love it. It's great. Welcome back to the Brennan Page. I'm Dwayne Page.
And this is Kyle Brennan. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Martin. Chris is the head strength and conditioning coach for LSU Baseball, one of the premier college baseball programs in the country. Before joining LSU, he was a strength and conditioning coordinator for the Houston Astros, where he oversaw the minor league strength coaches and the overall physical development of the organization's minor league players. Prior to leading the department, he served as the Rehab strength and conditioning coordinator, working closely with players recovering from injuries to optimize their return to performance. A former pitcher at Kent State University, he understands the demands of the game from both a player and a coach's perspective. So Chris and I first met in the Dominican Republic, actually. We didn't get on that in the call today. But we met in the DR, and then we ended up living with each other for a couple seasons later on. And the thing that always stood out to me about Chris is his ability to get buy-in with players. He obviously is a very good strength coach, but his ability to just tie in different aspects of life and to create interest and a relationship with guys, and I think that really translates to what we do.
Yeah, from myself not knowing him prior to this, to having him on the podcast, it was, as much as it was informative, it was nice to get his take on his approach to training some of these athletes. You could tell that the guy, like I said, the guy's super passionate about what it is that he knows and what he does. But I think one of the more impressive parts about him is his ability to get, like you said, that buy-in from his athletes. I really enjoyed this episode, enjoyed getting to know Chris a little bit, and I look forward to having him on again because that was a lot of fun.
So, dude, you proposed on Monday.
That's right.
Yeah.
And she said yes.
Congratulations.
So Dwayne, his now fiance posted a photo on Instagram of the receipt for the reservation that Chris made. So he made the reservation before all this, and it said me and my girlfriend are celebrating our engagement, and he goes, hopefully.
Yeah, I don't think we would have shown up if she said no.
Yeah.
You went on your own.
Yeah. This is a party of one now.
So what was that like? How nervous were you?
Not too bad. It was more stress because I scheduled it. So Monday was her birthday. I scheduled it a little over a month ago, like maybe beginning of January. And we had a photographer there and stuff. But looking at the schedule, I was like, okay, Monday's going to be our off day. I'll probably go in morning, early afternoon, get some stuff done. We might have a couple guys trickle in and train and stuff, but then I'll be able to get out by like 4:30. And we did it at like a park downtown, close to where we were scheduled for her birthday dinner. And then we ended up practicing on Monday. So then I was like, oh, shoot, I hope this does not affect this because I don't have a backup plan. But our coach let me kind of cut out a little bit early. I was like, hey, set up this proposal. He was like, yeah, don't worry about it. So I had my assistant just at the end of practice, take a couple guys through their lift and get our GPS data all sorted out, and off I went.
Nice.
But I was just more stressed with the logistics of it than being nervous.
Yeah. Oh, it's a stressful thing. You gotta coordinate a lot, and the element of surprise intact. Was she surprised?
She was. She had no clue. And the photographer was in the park with her brother, and they were acting like he was doing headshots. So we walked by him, and then we had the spot picked out, and then the photographer flipped around. But yeah, Rachel says, she's like, yeah, I thought to myself, oh, this is a nice spot for headshots as we walked by them. So she wasn't prepared for it.
That was smart. Good plan, good execution.
But there was this little sign in the park. It was the Capitol Park, so there's the Capitol building and some other things on the ground. And there's this old arsenal. It used to be the biggest arsenal or store of weapons in the state of Louisiana or something. Now it's kind of just an artifact. But the sign there had buttons on it, and so if you press the buttons, it would kind of talk to you about certain things on the property. She's like, "Oh, let's go over there and see that." And I was like, "Let's not."
That seems really dumb.
Yeah.
I love
But
it.
it worked out.
Good for
Yeah.
you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
For people who aren't aware, Chris and I and his now fiancee Rachel have spent the last 2 seasons together as roommates. So I was really happy for you too.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I also wanted to get your take on the Tiger because I didn't
Mike?
expect you. Yeah. First name basis.
Yeah, everyone knows Mike. He's the only living tiger on a college campus in the
That's pretty
United
cool.
States, at least. Yeah, it's cool. He's got his little 15,000 foot enclosure, and it's right on the north end of the football stadium. So anytime you're over there, stop by, see if he's out and about. So when we got that snowstorm like a month ago, we got like 8 inches of snow. Um, I had gone in early because we were on the fence. This whole place shuts down if you get any sort of snow, and then when you set the 24-hour record for snow down here, we were shut down for like 3 days in the city, basically, like nothing was open. So I was in there early before the snow started, and then they ended up canceling it because they were like, "Well, we'll be able to get guys in, but it's like going home that's going to be an issue." And I was like, "Well, it's not going to be that bad." So I just worked out, and then I walked over there, and Mike was out playing in the snow, so I got some cool pictures and videos of him.
That's cool.
I think it's hilarious that his name's Mike.
It's he's named after, so he's Mike the seventh currently. Um, but the original Mike was named after one of the athletic trainers from way back when, and the name has just stuck.
Hmm.
It's a serious
Seven.
honor.
Yeah.
Serious honor to have a tiger named after you. You know,
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
A
yeah,
lineage of tigers.
Kind of cool. Cooler than like a building.
yeah, yeah. Like you might be. It might be we have the Danzy building, the John Danzy building for the gym. But listen, you got a tiger, a lineage of tigers named after you. That's pretty badass.
Yeah, I'd take a tiger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, so how's college ball compared to pro ball?
It's different. Um, maybe more different than I thought it was going to be. Um, like in a lot of ways, and we can touch on those, but like it's different because it's a much smaller operation. So pro ball to me almost feels like kind of very corporate-y. Like if you're going to compare it to the business world, like large operation, lots of departments, lots of people, where this almost feels like it's like more of like startup vibes, where it's smaller staff. Like we have our coaching staff are four on-field coaches, two others that are director of player development for pitching and offense, our director of ops, our two medical people, and then a GA and student managers and myself. And then I have an assistant who helps me and also does stuff with cheer. But like that's our operation. And then there's obviously administrative people, but in terms of how much interaction I have with them, it's not much. So a lot smaller operation, which is good on one hand because things can get done a lot quicker. So when I was with the Astros, if you wanted, if you had a relatively big ask, like you might run it up the chain to the director of sports med and performance, who then has to go talk to the AGMs, who have to talk to finance, and like all of a sudden 3 weeks have gone by and you haven't heard anything. Here, like I'll give an example. Like I wanted to purchase a Nord board when I got here, and it was like $4,000 to get it purchased. I don't think I even had the sentence out of my mouth to the head coach, and he was like, "Yeah, just get it." I was like, "All right, that was easy." Uh, so smaller operation, different focus at the professional level. And I can speak for my time with the Astros, but in general, it's more about development than it is winning at the minor league levels. Like if you win, great, but like the ultimate goal is to produce major league players in the long run, or players that other teams view as having value, so that you can trade for major league pieces at the trade deadline and bolster your roster. Versus here, it's win now every day. So like, what do we do to maximize our chances of winning every single day? Because that's obviously our biggest priority. And development's a piece of that, but it's definitely more secondary, especially in season. So that's a difference. The annual schedule is very different. Like in pro ball, it's like in season, off season, and outside of maybe a couple off season camps, it's like 5 months off, 7 months on, roughly. Here, it's you have your in season, and then you have summer ball, which players may or may not participate in. Some of our guys may go to Team USA. Some might do nothing. Some might go to the Cape or the Northwoods or something. Then you come back, and then you've got like your fall ball period. So the first 6 weeks are our individual 8 hour window, and so it's kind of heavy strength and conditioning focus, individual work with the baseball coaches. Then we transition to our 20-hour window for 6-ish weeks, which is basically a mini competitive cycle because we're scrimmaging 3 times a week, playing 3 times, or playing some outside games. Guys are kind of trying to earn their way into the conversation for the preseason in the spring. Like you're not going to win your job in the fall, but you can certainly put yourself in the conversation. Then we go to winter break where guys leave for anywhere from like 3 to 5 weeks. And that's one of the times where we don't see them outside of the summer. And like it's like a weirdly short downtime, off season type period, but also like our 20-hour window ended right before Thanksgiving, and so then you're stuck with like the pitchers. Like, okay, well, what do we do with the pitchers now? Like, do they continue to throw bullpens at what volumes, or do we kind of taper them down for a little bit, but then we have to ramp them up quicker if we do that? Get back for winter break, and you've got like your 5 week preseason, and boom, then you go. So like the it's like a much more undulating schedule in college versus like on off of pro ball. So that's different. And then just the juggling of everything that is not baseball that comes with the college setting. So classes, NCAA rules and restrictions, the NIL, the day and age of NIL versus professional baseball. It's like that's your full time job, and that's what you're expected to treat it as. And guys here are expected to treat it like a job, but you're working with a little bit more constraints at times in terms of required off days and what's optional, what's not optional, how many hours do we have to work with. So you just have some more different parameters within which you have to work.
It sounds like a little bit. It sounds like there's some opportunity for there to be some more of an intimate relationship with the players and staff. Even though the undulating schedule, it's kind of like you bond through these kinds of experiences, whether it's juggling with these parameters, limitations on practice time, or optional versus not optional. But from what you're saying, it sounds like you're spending a lot of time with these people and the staff, which is cool.
Yeah.
A question that I had, because I happened to watch some clips, videos of stuff you've been involved with. There is a priority on developing major league players for you guys at LSU as well. So what's the balance like juggling between like win now, especially in season, versus helping develop guys for the next level?
Yeah, it's also, again, this is one other difference from the collegiate setting and the pro setting, but in the pro setting, largely you're not going to have too high of a difference in terms of workload for players. Like you might have guys that only play 2 games a week as position players, um, and guys who play 5 or 6. But here you might have guys who go, a couple weeks without playing, or you might have pitchers who log 2 or 3 real competitive innings and guys who throw 100. In pro ball, you don't see that discrepancy between like number of innings thrown because the guys who would throw 2 innings just get released and they get fired because they're not seen as guys who are going to contribute at the major league level for that team. Um, but we push physical development pretty hard in the off season, especially that 8 hour window. Like 4 of those hours are strictly going to strength and conditioning. As we get into the 20-hour window, and again, we're competing a little bit more at that point, we go down to like 3 1 hour lifts a week. And I tell the guys at that point of the year, physical development is still relatively high on the priority list. Like we can't spend 6 weeks a year really focusing on this stuff. So although you're competing, like I understand and also don't really care if you don't feel perfect all the time, because that's kind of the goal here. We have to keep pushing the needle, moving the needle forward. Winter break, we go back up and we take it up to 4 or 5 times a week lifting. It's like, hey, I'm just going to try and squeeze out as much of this time as possible, um, and really try to build as robust of an athlete as I can heading into the preseason window. Then we dial it back down to three, and then once we get to basically February through the rest of the season, having guys lift a minimum of 2 times a week. The volume comes down pretty significantly. So in professional baseball, like we're still trying to make physical development jumps in season. Here, I kind of tell them like, hey, if we can maintain what we did all fall, all winter, all summer, and this 4 or 5 month window here, we kind of just stick in a holding pattern. I'll call that a win. We just can't go backwards. So I can't have you come into the fall at 180 pounds, get to the season at 190 and you're in a good spot. And then we're back at 180 when we get to June. Like we can't just fall apart like that. So we've got to maintain some semblance of robustness. And some guys, seek out additional training on their own. So they'll come up and, do some optional extra stuff. Guys who aren't playing as much, I might dial up their training a little bit. And then the everyday guys, I want them to feel good and feel ready, but also just not wither away as the season goes. So it's just less of a premium on physical development in season is really the big thing compared to professional baseball.
Yeah, I know for me personally, it was definitely something that I noticed was by the end of the season, sometimes I felt, weaker, lighter, like I'd lost some weight. I've talked to guys about that before previously, and some guys even talk about just coming in heavier with the expectation that they are going to lose some weight. And I think that that can be a little bit of a misconception that, hey, if I just come in heavier and I lose the weight or whatever, I just don't feel like that's really a healthy approach. So what's your take on being able, like, how is it that you can maintain or, not just wither away as the season goes on?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's a really important piece of this, and it's well intentioned by the players. Like they are acknowledging, hey, I've got this problem with weight loss throughout the season, and I am trying to find a solution. And my solution for that is to give myself this buffer zone where I come in heavier and then I just expect to get down to my playing weight. My conversation with them is like, we shouldn't go into the season with that it's a foregone conclusion. Like, hey, I'm going to lose weight because I talk to them, and a lot of this is educational about nutrition. And, at the collegiate level, it's kind of eye-opening how little guys are educated coming in on just the nutritional piece of things. And that's kind of our job with myself and our nutritionist, is to kind of educate them on that. But it's like, hey, weight gain, weight loss at its core fundamentally is a math equation of calories in versus calories out. Unless you have learned to reinvent the laws of thermodynamics, in which case you'd be a billionaire, like we don't have to lose weight. And if you look at that equation with calories in, calories out, and which way the number on the scale is going to go, like the calories out portion is, I think that's relatively not changeable. Like there are just activity demands that are going to be there regardless. And even if we cut a little bit of your practice volume, I don't think it's going to, change a ton of that. So it's like the calories in part of the equation is what we can really play with and manipulate. And so for some of them, it's just like, let me educate you on some nutritional strategies. How do we increase our caloric intake, especially on days where we're playing games or have heavier practices or it's hotter? And so even if it's conversations like, hey, like, I'll go up to a guy in the fourth inning, somebody who I know struggles with keeping weight on in season, and just ask him, like, hey, what have you eaten? And a lot of times I'll get like, oh, I had like a sandwich before the game. And they're like, the ones we get delivered are like the quarter sandwiches that are sliced up from Jimmy John's or Jersey Mike's or something. I'm like, okay, that's good, but we need more while you're playing. And a lot of times guys are like, well, I don't want to feel full. I'm like, all right, let's find something low volume, high calorie density. So we've got honey stingers in the dugout. We have nuts in the dugout. We have, even if I'm like, hey, can you just drink Gatorade instead of water? Like Is drinking pure sugar like the best thing? Maybe not, but if it's going to help you keep weight on, like I'm perfectly fine with it. So it's like, how do I, start to bring some awareness to it in a way that's not going to affect their focus on the game or performance, but just start to build habits, build strategies to increase their caloric intake throughout the day. Teaching a guy, we have a smoothie station in the gym. Like, how do I teach you to make a calorically dense smoothie versus a lower calorie smoothie? A lot of times guys just don't know. They don't. A lot of them don't even know what the difference between a carbohydrate and a protein is when they come in. Um, so educating them like, hey, let's add whole milk, 2 scoops of peanut butter, scoop of protein, some oats, a big squeeze of honey, and maybe some bananas, and now we've got ourselves a 700 calorie smoothie versus like ice, scoop of protein, almond milk, and strawberries, and now we've got 150 calorie smoothie. Um, like a little tweak like that is not that big of a difference, but if it's 500 calories. If you do that every single day, it's a difference of a pound a week. And so it's little things like that, educational points. There's no shortage in terms of food resources they have here, but it's the education, the awareness, and the habits that come day in and day out, and teaching them kind of how to take care of them, that piece of their physical preparation.
Chris, a lot of these guys are coming in. You guys are recruiting them or have eyes on them. I don't know the rules nowadays, but 14, 15, 16 years old, you're starting to build a relationship with some of these players. And then by the time they show up, they are 17, 18, 19, depending on where you get them from. And it's a very pivotal age where I think, as Dwayne and I have talked about with ourselves and other guests, that's where a lot of players transition into I like baseball and I'm really good at baseball to like this is going to become something I do at the college level and potentially beyond. Having said that, I'm curious about your upbringing through baseball and how you got into playing and what your mindset's like at that age as you're um, let's start with that. So how do you get into baseball and what's Chris like as a kid growing up?
Yeah. So I was born in Kansas City, lived there till I was 4. Probably started playing t-ball in Kansas. I don't know for sure. It was either there. Then we moved to New Jersey for a year and a half. Uh, at some point in that window, I started playing t-ball and I started playing soccer. And I remember I played soccer for 2 seasons and then stopped. So I did not play much soccer. Um, so I played baseball. That turned into like a coach pitch league when I moved to Cincinnati when I was 5-ish years old, 5 or 6. And funny enough, that team that you just randomly get put on, we had uh, 3 or 4 Division 1 players on that team. Uh, 2 guys who played pro ball, maybe one, and a big leaguer. So like, I just like by luck of the draw got put on like a pretty elite coach pitch
Legit.
team.
Holy crap.
Like the odds of that are not high. And the guy who ended up pitching in the big leagues, he was my best friend through basically middle school. And then he went to one of the big private Catholic schools in the area, and I went to our public school. But his dad was our head coach basically from that point through 8th grade. And then after or into 8th grade, or into high school, we kind of started playing on like a more serious travel team. Um, and so we played together on that travel team through high school, and his dad was one of our assistant coaches at that point all the way through. Um, so, I kind of like grew up um, with that family, and uh, his dad was our coach. We played like local Cincinnati baseball and then into, a little bit more travel ball and then into like the serious travel stuff in high school.
So at
Um,
this point, you eventually become a pitcher in college, but at this point, are you playing other positions? Are other sports involved?
yeah, I grew up playing shortstop and pitcher. I was I was bigger when we were younger. Like when I was in second grade or first grade, I was in like the 99th percentile for both height and weight. Like I was just bigger than all the other kids. So and pretty much really through high school, like even at the younger ages, like I always probably was in the 99th percentile for throwing velocity. So I just naturally was one of the pitchers on our team. I just threw harder than guys, and I was. But then as like puberty caught up, other guys caught up to me. I ended up being 5'11" and a half. So like that ended up running its course. But yeah, I played shortstop on our team. Um, Played shortstop and pitched pretty much all the way through maybe my sophomore year of high school. At that point, like I knew I was going to pitch in college, most likely. The two-way thing was kind of floating around a little bit, but like I knew I was going to be a pitcher, and any sort of hitting or position player stuff was going to be secondary. So at that point, I moved over to second base just because pitching twice a week in high school, and it just let me save my arm and make little flips over to first base throughout the week when I wasn't pitching. So like junior, senior year was basically like a second baseman and pitcher.
I'm sure that the experience as a middle infielder helped you be an absolute PFP machine, though.
Yeah, I think I was pretty good at PFPs. I don't like. There's none in my head that like stand out throughout the years of like, oh, I royally messed that one up.
Yeah, just as a catcher and as a coach, man, I have a serious appreciation for guys who can field the position. You know.
In high school, I didn't have to worry too much about it. I was like, just trying to strike out as many guys as possible. When I got to college, then like actually fielding your position became a little bit more of a pressing issue.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see those guys who in high school have that capability to, rack up the strikeouts, and then, you get to college and it's like, what, I need to, run over and cover first base. Like I'm mostly striking these guys out.
Yeah, that. But again, like I don't know. I think you've got some semblance of athleticism, and some pitchers more than others. Obviously, uh, I feel like it's not that difficult to pick up. But
Agreed. Agreed.
I,
I always loved the freaking big dudes, like the 6'5", like heavier guys that could really field their position. That stuff just fires me up. I had a teammate of mine in college who was with our two best guys at PFPs. One was like a 5'9", 145-pound kid, and then one was like a 6'5", close to like 300, 280-pound guy, 300-pound guy. So it was just so interesting to watch both of them do that stuff.
yeah, we had a pitcher on our team in college. Nothing to do with PFPs, but our conditioning test every year was a 6 minute mile, and this might have been my junior or senior year. And we roll out to the track, and I was in pretty good shape. Like I was typically in the top two or three pitchers finishing it. And this kid was a freshman, 6'5", 230, and I guess at some point in his life had ran cross country. And he beat me by like a good 100 plus meters in that
Wow.
6 minute mile. So like I remember running up the final straightaway. I'm like, this guy is just so far up there and he's so big. I'm like, what is going on? But yeah, he was just a machine.
I love that, man. Big man
And
can move.
he ran like a 5:30 at 6'5", 230. I'm like, all right, man,
Yeah,
you
That's
do you.
nuts.
that's
That's
legit.
nuts.
Sorry, I interrupted you earlier. So it sounded like you were in that ninth, 10th grade range, and you're surrounded by your best friend. He's a very good player. His dad's been your coach for a while. The community you're in has a lot of talent. Um, so yeah, continue from there, please.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll back up more. I started playing football in third grade, and so that was also funny because of the height and weight thing. Like I was on the offensive line when I started playing football, um, but I always wanted to play quarterback. And then by the time like fourth, fifth grade rolled around, I was not quite as big, so I was kind of moved over to like defensive end, fullback position, and then continued to like trend smaller and was like linebacker, tailback. And then finally in like sixth grade, probably, like I finally started to get to play quarterback. And I was like, oh, this is fun. And so like I ended up being like a quarterback and a defensive back. And then by the time we got to middle school, it was like pretty much just playing quarterback and a little bit of safety. But I didn't like getting hit. So I was like, the more I can play quarterback, the better, because I'm trying not to get killed by the kids that are like actually hitting puberty now. Um, and I enjoyed football, but after eighth grade, I stopped playing, and I was like, I'm just gonna focus on baseball. It was more, like football games were so fun, but I hated the idea of practicing 5 or 6 days a week to play one game. Like I just wanted to play games, and so I'm like, well, with baseball I can play more games, so let's just do that. And then freshman year, and this is funny, we were talking about golf earlier. Freshman year, I tried out for the golf team at our high school. So we had a varsity team and I think two JV teams. There were like 24 spots total and like 27 kids who went out for it. And I was uh, one of the few who got cut. It was just not good. Like the 2 days of golf tryouts that year, I think I shot like a 105, 106, and I missed one of the JV teams by like 3 shots.
Damn.
And I don't know what happened, but so I stopped. I was like, okay, I'm not going to try and play golf anymore. Like that was silly. And then some point between my freshman and sophomore year, like I just got better at playing golf. I don't know what I did differently. Maybe just like became more athletic or something. But like at that point, I could like break 90 with relatively good consistency, which would have easily gotten me on to one of the golf teams there. But just did that for fun. So in high school, it was only baseball. And then I played some rec basketball in the winter in a rec league just to stay in shape and have fun because I also enjoyed playing basketball. Um, Ended up tearing my ACL as a junior doing that. So in hindsight, maybe not worth it, but it is what it is.
So at that
Um,
when you have that injury, where are you at with your college journey?
yeah. So again, like I threw hard for our age group. I tore it the week before like official practices started my junior year of high school. So pretty big recruiting year. Like that was at the point where like your junior year was still like your big recruiting spring and summer. And I was like, okay, this is not good. Like I'm not going to play at all. At that point, I had offers from Kent, Miami, Cincinnati, and Furman, and so I was like, well, this is pretty much all I'm going to get. Like, I'm not going to be available until like mid to late fall at this point, at best. So I committed to Kent. But like, I picked up my first offer in December of my sophomore year of high school. So I still, at that point, I had played on the freshman team as a freshman, and I went to the biggest high school in Ohio. So like a freshman being on varsity was almost unheard of, and really even sophomores like to make the varsity team as a sophomore was pretty difficult. But I went down to some showcase tournament in Florida, and I was like 82 to 86 while I was down there in December of that year. And so Cincinnati offered me a scholarship like right after that. So at this point, I hadn't even played a varsity game, and I had an offer from Cincinnati. Came into that sophomore season. I got put on the varsity team, but I didn't play much. And again, our high school team was really good, and so I would go down and play a game occasionally, or like pitch to get some innings with the JV team. But I think I pitched like 8 innings on varsity as a sophomore and had like 8 at bats. So at this point, I haven't played that much baseball. Go into the summer circuit, have a good summer, go to some showcases and stuff. I think I ended up topping out like that summer or fall of after my sophomore year, like 89, 90. Picked up a couple more offers, went on some visits to some other schools throughout the fall. So I'd gone to Michigan, Ohio State, Pitt, Virginia Tech, like some of those Big Ten ACC schools in the area. And a lot of them were like, we like you as a player, but we want to see you play this upcoming spring. And then we'll kind of like, make a decision on an offer or anything like that. And then I blew my ACL. And at that point, like I said, I was like, well, these are the offers I've got. I don't really anticipate getting much more because by the time the next time I play competitively is going to be my senior spring. And at that point, most of these teams are going to have their recruiting classes pretty full. So I just, pulled the trigger and committed to Kent, which is where I was kind of leaning to begin with anyways. But that kind of was like, all right, it's time to go.
That high school program must be pretty freaking legit to have a guy mid to upper 80s, on the JV team. Well, I mean, playing on the varsity team, getting like 8 innings or so his sophomore season. That their high school program must be pretty legit.
Yeah, the class before me and my class were both pretty loaded. So my junior year when I didn't play because I was hurt, I think the highest we ended up getting ranked like as high as number 7 in the USA Today poll, like number 7 in the country.
Shit.
And so I think we had 5 guys on that team who ended up playing pro ball, like 11 guys who played Division I baseball, one major leaguer, Um, and 3 or 4 guys play in the SEC or the ACC. So like it was just like a loaded couple of classes of baseball talent at our school, really.
Was that was your high school program known for baseball typically?
We were always good, but we weren't viewed as like a powerhouse. They won their first state championship last year. Uh, we Again in Cincinnati, there are some really good schools like Moeller, St. X, some of the private schools, and Moeller was kind of that one roadblock that we like were kind of unable to get past. Uh, so my junior year, we're 26-0. We've pretty much run ruled like 85% of the teams that we've played. And we it was the quarterfinals or something, Sweet 16, something like that. We ended up facing a kid from a school in Dayton who was going to Virginia Tech, good pitcher, kind of shut us down. We made some errors in the field, lost one game all year. That was the game we lost, and we were done. And then my senior year, to go to the state Final Four up in Columbus, we were playing against Moeller. And it was a pretty epic game. We made a 2-run comeback in the bottom of the 7th inning. Then I rolled my ankle pretty bad in that comeback. So I watched the rest of the game from the bench. We had like a big collision at home plate that inning. Benches cleared, and then we ended up losing in the 9th inning in extras on a bases loaded hit by pitch. We lost 4-3. So, but it was like a pretty crazy game for the high school sense. We were playing at University of Cincinnati. There's probably like 1,500 plus people there, like big atmosphere for a high school game. Like just a lot of things you don't typically see. But like we just never could get over the hump. And then after I left, they got to the Final Four at one point and then lost, maybe in the state finals, and they finally won it last year. So like we were always good, but like never viewed as like one of those powerhouses. But I think that's changed a little bit over the last 5 to 10 years.
That's cool. University of Cincinnati is a nice field. I remember playing in some in the what the heck's the name? The Cincy. I played in the Cincy Flames tournament probably like 8 times in my life, and I think that that we played some games there, which was always really cool.
Yeah, it's a cool spot. Right in the middle of campus, the football field's right there. Uh, Good facility, good crowds. Yeah, I always enjoyed it growing up when we got to play there.
So Chris, you then transition into Kent. I'm assuming the ACL. Just knowing you now, the ACL recovered pretty well, and you're headed to campus. What's your mindset like at that point? Are you know what you want to study? Do you have aspirations for your playing career or beyond? And where's your head at that point?
Yeah, I had gotten scouted a little bit professionally in high school, but again with that injury and just not really. I played one season of varsity baseball, so like I just didn't play a lot of baseball. But in my head, I'm like, I'm still gonna play professional baseball. I was always a good student though, and so like I cared about that aspect of things. I wasn't just there to, you know, what is it? We didn't come here to play school. Like I wasn't that guy. I wasn't Cardell Jones. So I picked exercise science just out of the rip because I was like, this sounds interesting. I like exercising, but did not know what I wanted to do with it. And I kicked around a bunch of different ideas throughout my first year or two. It was like, maybe I'll go the PT route. Maybe I'll go to med school and be like become a sports med doctor or sports med physician. And then I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do 7 more years of school after this, so like that's out. Um, Probably thought of a couple other things at one point. Well, then I tore my other ACL my junior year of college. So uh, at that point, I was like, maybe I'll go to grad school, get my MBA, and like stay in. I knew at that point I kind of wanted to stay in baseball if I could, or at least the sporting world. So like, maybe I'll get my MBA and go into like more of the business front office side or the agency side of things. And then I tore my other ACL, went through the rehab process again, and had started to gravitate and really just enjoy training while I was in college. And so I started to think about the strength and conditioning, sports performance realm. Um, And when I tore that second knee, my advisors in the exercise science program did a really good job working with me, and they basically fast tracked me through a master's program. So at that point, they we looked ahead, and my senior year, my last semester was all grad school classes that I don't know how this worked out, but I got to double dip. Like they counted for the ending credits for my undergrad, but I also got to apply them towards my master's degree. So did that, got my CSCS, went up to got an internship at Cressy Sports Performance in Massachusetts between my fourth and fifth years. So I was supposed to go back to the Northwoods League that summer. Landed the internship, went into our coach's office and was like, "Hey, I think this is going to be a lot more beneficial for me, like in the long run." At this point, I was starting to see like the professional baseball side of things dwindle, and I was like, I can't be the guy that is left without a backup plan and is playing indie ball until I'm 28. Like I need to do something. Um, and so I went up, did my internship with Cressy, which is great because in that environment, like obviously I'm getting 3 months of my first real strength and conditioning coaching experience, but training at the same time. So I felt like as a player, I wasn't going backwards by doing it. Did that, came back for my fifth year, and that time at Cressy, I was like, okay, this is the route I want to go. Um, Came back for my fifth year, and in December of that year, I got a LinkedIn message from Bill Furcus with the Astros, who was he was the director of sports medicine and performance of the time with the Astros, and basically he said something along the lines of, "Hey, saw your profile, saw the internship with Cressy. It's pretty interesting. We're looking to hire an apprentice position here in Florida for this upcoming summer. Would love to talk to you about it sometime." Something like that. And I messaged him back, and I had actually scheduled myself to go to Lance Wheeler's Pitchapalooza conference in Nashville, which was starting 2 days after that message from Bill. So I sent him a message back and said, "Hey, would love to chat more. I'm going to this conference. Can we set something up next week?" And it turns out Pete Patilla, who was the farm director at the time, was also going to that conference. So 2 days after this, kind of seemingly random Instagram DM, now I'm having lunch with the Astros farm director, and just really, really fortunate timing with that. Had some good conversations with Pete while I was there. Got back, this is like mid-December. Ended up going through a series of phone interviews with different folks at the Astros, and then they offered me the uh, the the apprenticeship for the upcoming season, with the caveat that I wouldn't try and chase a professional baseball dream or anything like that after. And I was like, "Yep, no problem. You don't have to worry about that whatsoever. Like, I'll go play this last year, enjoy it, and then I'll see you in West Palm." So. Uh, that's kind of like how things rolled through my academic career a little bit, and how they unfolded from like random exercise science to, okay, yeah, I want to do strength and conditioning, to like, oh, I've got an internship with the Houston Astros set up from before I graduate. So I finished my fifth year playing, finished my master's that semester. So that was done and dusted. So silver lining, if you get hurt in redshirt, you can just get a grad degree, I guess. Um, and then we lost in the conference tournament that year, didn't make the NCAA tournament. And 3 days later, I was in West Palm getting it started.
That's cool.
There's some uh, underlying things in that there's some underlying messages in what you're talking about. So it's easy for someone that knows you or listening now to be like, okay, this is Chris Martin. He's a strength coach at one of the most prominent college programs. He used to be recently used to be in charge of minor league strength conditioning with a very successful professional organization, and he had done all these things. But at the time of your latter high school, early college, you are just establishing what's important to you. Uh, Obviously, you love baseball, and um, you take that very seriously, and you had aspirations there, but you also recognize some other strengths and interests you had. So you're now prioritizing those. And it's not an accident that you're just a good student who liked training that ends up getting an internship at Cressy, and then these other opportunities pop up. There's definitely some action steps that you took, the proactive nature. And I think that's a really good lesson for players going through that process, that age, or parents and coaches that are trying to help them through it. Is that you have to identify what's important, but then also it's not just the assistant GM of the Astros and Eric Cressy and these people aren't just be like, oh, that one, he's there, he likes training, let's just take him. Uh, I think a lot of that's lost in the current state of recruiting.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack just in that statement, I think, because I've often like kind of deemed it towards like deflected it as like, oh, it was good luck that I got that message at that time from Bill Furcus. And I've had that conversation with some people, and like I remember my mom saying like, yeah, but like you put yourself in the position to get that message. Like there are a lot of people who were not in the position to even receive that message from Bill Furcus at that time. Um, and so like that resonated with me in terms of like yeah, there's an element of luck to all this and good timing, um, but like you have to put in the work to make yourself like viewed as valuable or a wanted commodity by other people. Um, I think like going back further, like I remember doing my internship calls with the folks at Cressy, and at that point, like I didn't know much like true strength and conditioning. The most I had done would probably be like my own training with the baseball team, and then like, in my exercise science courses, like writing an 8-week mock program for a fictional high school player who doesn't exist, or like high school soccer player, or whatever the assignment was given to me. But I think, understanding that I liked it, I wanted to learn more about it. I was proactive in my undergrad studies of like pursuing things that interested me. I had a really, really good academic advisor who got me interested in a lot of just like the physiology stuff side behind, or the underlying physiology of like why a lot of things happen, and did a lot of research hours with him as an undergrad student. So we're just in there helping grad students doing their thesis or their dissertation with data collection, and I got to see like a lot of different things that like really intrigued me. So there were people doing different studies on different responses to resistance exercise and how the body responds to that. There was people who would have get people doing Viking trials in our environmental chamber in the hot and cold, but like I immersed myself in that stuff, and like I chased what I was interested in, and I chased it hard. And did a lot of research and digging, and I was the kid in probably junior senior year of high school, who was like, I'm interested in this exercise science stuff. Like I was the guy on the team. Like I was formulating my own pre-workouts before we would lift. So like I would buy all the raw ingredients from like GNC, like the GNC white label stuff. So like I would
Yeah.
buy beta alanine, citrulline, arginine. I would take caffeine pills and crush them up, and then like I would add them like whatever doses I was like playing around with different ingredients. Like I would like combine them all into like a powder, and then like pour orange juice into it and like drink it and see if I liked it or not. Like I was that guy, like experimenting on myself, doing stuff like that, and just you know like genuinely trying to become more knowledgeable in stuff that interested me, and then starting to take action in terms of like, okay, I'm gonna have to get a real job at some point, whether I play professional baseball or
Chris, when
not.
you're
And like,
doing these different things, seeking different learning opportunities as an undergrad, and then also as a college player, making your own. Oh, I think we lost Chris for a sec.
oh,
Dwayne, it says reconnecting for me.
Yeah, he's just frozen in time right now for me.
So, starting to say you're very curious about these different things that you're learning about, and then you're also, making your own. You're going around the loopholes of NSF and making your own supplements.
I have some very strong opinions on NSF if you would care to hear them at any point, but that's
Go
beside the
for
point.
it.
I'm
Uh,
all in on that.
yeah, do that right now.
It's a huge money grab, and they don't provide any better servicing than like other like Informed Sport or some other third party testing. But they pay leagues to say you can only use these products. Therefore, products who want to get into those leagues must pay NSF to get that slap that certification on there. And it's not cheap, and it's also pretty much the exact same quality as like Informed Sport. And I really learned this when Dan Howells had somebody from Australian rules football come through the Astros facility at one point while we were there, and we were talking about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, everywhere in Australia uses Informed Sport. We don't use NSF at all." And I was like, "Okay, well, an entire continent that competes at the world level and Olympic level, is okay with entrusting Informed Sport, then I think it's probably just as fine of a service as NSF." And that kind of opened my eyes to it. But anybody who tells you a product's the devil because it's not NSF has just not like done their due diligence on like what the whole nutrition industry is really like. That's my very short rant on it. It's a money grab.
So Informed Sport, well, so the fear that everyone has is I get drug tested. If I don't pay extra for this certification, then I run the risk of, oh, I took some creatine that was fine, and then I popped for something, and now the world thinks that I'm this cheating scumbag, even though I didn't do it. So then they purchased it. So if you could avoid that with Informed Sport,
Yeah, the green check
okay,
mark. Again, that's not me advocating if you're an NCAA, MLB, or any other league that uses NSF. Like my message to the athletes is use NSF because it offers you a layer of protection that you don't get otherwise, and that's just the nature of how the game works right now. But I can make that recommendation while also saying the game is rigged and it's kind of bullshit.
fair enough.
Mic
Money
There we
drop.
go.
talks.
Yep. We'll see if we get canceled now, but always run the risk.
That's a pretty mild one to go down on, so I hope not.
There's more time. So uh, the point I'm getting to, or the question I'm coming around to, is you are just having been around you for the past chunk of years. Is when you're interested in something, you're very good at and curious with sharing it with the people you're around. I'm assuming you were like that when you were in college also. So are you involving your teammates and your peers in some of these different things that you're doing and learning at that point?
Sharing your pre-workout cocktails with the guys.
Not so much with our teammates. I kind of got that fixed with like the students in the exercise science program, um, because by the time like the end of my junior and senior year rolled around, like I was pretty good friends with like all the grad students who were getting their masters or their doctorates in the exercise science program, and then I obviously joined them getting my master's. So like outside of baseball and during the day, those are the people I spent my hours with, and that's where I kind of scratched that curiosity bug. And um, another funny story is, and this is just like a weird coincidence, was so my last semester of grad school, or my fifth year, is my last semester of my master's. We have a guy named Jake Biting who is entering the PhD program at Kent to get his PhD in exercise physiology. And I think he was teaching some classes at Johns Hopkins, not Johns Hopkins, John Carroll, um, up in Cleveland as well. But he was the strength and conditioning coach with the Astros in 2017 at the major league level when they won the World Series. And he ended up leaving that offseason or the following offseason. But at that point, I had accepted the internship, and so the former Astros big league strength coach and I are in like some of the same classes in grad school together as I'm like preparing to go start my apprenticeship with them.
Holy shit.
Small world, right? Did that have
Yeah.
anything to do with Turkish reaching out? The that
Mm-mm.
head.
No, I had before he got there, I had already accepted it.
Okay.
Okay.
It was just like a happy coincidence. So we had some good conversations, like what to expect and what to be prepared for and this and that. But yeah, like I don't know. I really had a good time with like the academic side at school. Like I was in our lab doing like data collection and things for people's projects all the time. I ended up again, my internship with Cressy was something that fulfilled a graduation requirement for me. Um, it was either do an internship or write a thesis, and for some reason, I just didn't have interest in writing a thesis at the time. So I did that, but like I loved the research side of things and just like doing data collection, helping people with data analysis. And then in one of our statistics classes in grad school, we had to write a final paper that we basically did different statistical analysis on, and we could either use a set of dummy data that our professor gave us, or we could use a real life set of data if we had it. And so the guy who I wrote the final paper with, he and I used some of the data from one of the guy's thesis projects that they weren't using in their specific thesis. So we wrote the final paper, and then our professor was like, "You guys could just like end up publishing this." So we ended up, doing some revisions on it here and there, and it was somewhat of a long process, but we ended up getting a publication out of it, which is kind of cool.
Are you are you injured at this point when you're doing some of these things, or is this after you had uh, healed from the ACL?
Uh, Maybe early. I tore my ACL November of my junior year, but then I tried to play on it. So it was just my ACL. There was no meniscus or any other damage. So they're like, you're probably not going to do anything worse to it. So I just slapped on like the big offensive lineman knee brace and tried to just like gut it out. Um, and so I played for the first 3 weeks of that upcoming season in February into March. But my mechanics, I think mentally, like subconsciously, I was guarding and it was on my back leg, and I was just like not using my back leg like whatsoever, like I should have. And so I would be like 88 to 90 for like 15 pitches. And then by that point, like it was just all upper body. And my velo would drop to like 83 to 85 after like an inning. Like I just couldn't do anything about it. So I shut it down, saved the year, got a red shirt, and got the surgery. So then, like, that's like the end of my junior year. And so this is when I'm starting to become more involved really with like the actual exercise science program and not just taking like the general anatomy and physiology classes to go get a degree. So like that into my senior year was probably when I really started to get involved on like the research academic side of things.
Actually, I ask because I'm just picturing you the balance of being a student athlete, the amount of extra time and extracurricular stuff you're doing while also being a baseball player is difficult to balance all that.
Yeah. And again, like it wasn't like it was a ton of time consuming work outside of the actual lab when we were in there. So like I would be in there from like, I don't know, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. or 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then I go over to the field for practice, game, whatever. Outside of class hours when I was in classes. But like that was basically how I spent my mornings. Like I wasn't
Hmm.
at that point, like I wasn't the college kid who was sleeping in till 10 or 11, waking up and like get something to eat and go into the field. Like I wanted to apply myself because one, that's all I had ever known. Like that's just how I operated in terms of schoolwork. And two, like it was interesting to me. So like I enjoyed getting up and going and doing it.
Yeah, I mean, not knowing you much prior to this call and listening to you talk about exercise science and baseball, you can hear the passion, and you speak so well and about these topics. So it doesn't really come as a surprise to me to hear that it was not very difficult waking up like earlier comparatively to some teammates or other college athletes to get this kind of work done.
No, and there's the cliche saying like when you, what is it, when you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life. I don't think
Hmm.
that's exactly true, but it makes the difficult days easier.
Yeah.
And uh, like again, like if you enjoy what you're doing, you're gonna look forward to going in and doing work or doing whatever you're tasked to do on any given day.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I bring this up too is because it's stuff that I'm sure the athletes that you train and work with can see, because me personally, um, my first college I went to, we didn't have, I don't even think we really had a strength coach. Our strength and conditioning coaches were our baseball coaches. I played at a private Division II school. I don't think I had much experience at all with a strength coach. And then when I transferred to a Division III school, we had a strength and conditioning guy, but he was for all sports. When we did get to spend time with him, I thought he was fantastic, like a serious energy provider, and somebody who you just enjoyed being around, especially for those freaking like 6 a.m. lifts. That guy, was jacked up on Mountain Dew, to say the least. But as you start to get over into the training side of things, internship, and then working for the Astros, and now at LSU, there definitely can be some skepticism for athletes who don't have the kind of exposure to the things that you've been studying for so long, that you've been super passionate about. So how is it that you start to break into these athletes? Because obviously, day one, you got to have something written up for them. But over time, there has to be a certain amount of trust developed so that you can, then really do that quality of work.
Yeah. So there's also the quote, again, cliche, where it's like people don't care about what you know until they know how much you care. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't think that quote is like 100% true. Like you also have to show that you're competent for somebody to care what you think. Um, and so, with when you get a new athlete in, one, it's like, okay, I need to get to know you as like a person. I'm not going to be your best friend in a week, but like I need to like start to, know your past, know where you've been, understand as time goes, what makes you tick, what motivates you, things like that. Um, and you've got to show them some results somewhat early on. They don't have to be crazy or drastic, but like you've got to be able to show like over the first month or so that we've made a little bit of progress. And that helps drive buy-in, and then it becomes like this positive feedback loop where they're like, oh, that worked, so the next thing's probably going to work, so I'll probably buy into what you're telling me. um, you know I, you also want to give guys the right amount of information, and different guys are different. There are some who don't give a crap about strength and conditioning. They just want to go play. It's okay. How do I make this important to them? Well, I've got to relate it to the sport. I have to make it all about the sport and their performance and how they're going to be a better player. There are some who are like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that's great. But again, try to find avenues to where you get to a point where then they start to ask you good questions of, maybe why are we doing this, or why is he doing that exercise and I'm doing this exercise? Like if I can get you to that point, then I know the gears are starting to work a little bit. And then if I can explain that to you in a way that makes sense to you, and you go, oh, that makes sense. He's different than I am, and therefore we have different exercises. And the coach has realized that and acknowledged it and taken the time to put that into our programming. That gets you a win. And so just like compounding those small wins. And then over time, like you've got to deliver results. And, I think I haven't even gone through a full year here with our guys at LSU. And so like I don't even think that trust or buy-in can be 100% yet, because when I got here, it was basically the beginning of the school year, and we went into like a 2-week general prep phase where things weren't crazy, but we were like building some work capacity and some volume. And then we like got into training pretty hard after that, because that's the time of year that calls for it. And guys were sore. They were like feeling the response to training hard. Um, and some of them hadn't trained like that ever, or maybe in a while, or just coming. And we got all sorts of different guys. We had like 12 freshmen, like 11 transfers, some guys from last year's team, so like a bunch of guys from all over, at different points. And so then we have to get to the next phase was our 20-hour window, where it's like, okay, they're like, man, like I have to play 3 times a week and I don't feel good. And I have to acknowledge to them like, yes, I understand, and like you just kind of got to stick with me right now. Like this is just kind of the way it's got to be. Um, like I promise, there's a long-term thought process to this, and when we get into the season, I don't want you feeling sore on Friday at the beginning of a series and like not prepared to play. Like that's not the goal. But right now, you might have to be a little bit sore. Like stick with me through this.
That's a hard concept, especially for
Very.
nowadays athlete with the instant gratification and that instant sort of feedback. So what type of strategies do you take, and sort of, because again, it takes that trust that you described and that formation of a relationship with the athletes. So what are some strategies? Because it's like a trust me, bro type thing, or is it, it's got to come through some sort of feedback from the athlete.
Yeah, I mean, there is an element of the trust me, bro, to it. And I guess coming from the professional world, especially an organization as successful with the Astros, carries a little bit of weight when you get to LSU because you're coming from a destination that most of them want to land in. And
Hmm.
so you can kind of at times take the, like, I know where you want to go and I know how to get you there. Like, trust me, bro. But that doesn't always work, especially when you're physically not feeling perfect because of something that I've had you do.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a little bit of that, but like showing them that you're listening. And so if we get to a weekend and a guy is just like blown up for whatever reason, maybe it's practice volume, maybe it's something we did in the gym, maybe he fouled a ball off his shin and it really hurts. Like, and he's just like having a hard time, and we have box jumps. I'm just going to give it like a random example. And I tell him, okay, let's not do the box jumps. Let's switch it over to these kettlebell swings today. Like, let's just do some like fast kettlebell swings. Okay, well, I can get a win there by showing them I'm listening to you. I'm not here to destroy you, like destroy your body. There are a million ways to get this done. I'm here to work with you. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Like, this is not this authoritarian regime where it's do it my way or get lost, like my way or the highway. Um, Guys with injury histories, acknowledging that and tailoring their program around it, but also having that conversation with them of like, hey, this is why you're not trap bar deadlifting because you had this pars injury in your past, and the juice probably just isn't worth the squeeze. And there's different ways we can build these adaptations, and you just have that quick conversation with them. Um, but again, there is that element of like, trust me, bro. Like, I need you to see this whole year through for you to go, I get what he was talking about now. So then we get to the preseason, and the training demands are a little bit less in terms of how hard we're pushing the throttle down in the gym. Um, and then we get to in season and it's even a little bit less. And so again, the goal now is prioritize readiness for competition, not physical development. But like, I need to get through these 4 months of showing you how this really, really works, and how when we get to May and June, I want you to still feel strong, still feel like physically prepared, but also feel like your readiness is at the highest level it's been all season. Instead of just fighting this war of attrition where we're crawling to the finish line and like guys are just popping 12 ibuprofen a day to get through the day. Like, once we get through this whole year, I can kind of like maybe a debrief is the right word and be like, see, this is how the whole cycle works in my mind, in the way that I run things. And at that point, I think a lot of guys will come full circle and go, I get it. Okay, let's hit the ground running now that we're done playing.
Yeah.
And so
And
it's an education process. It's showing them that you're listening. It's delivering results. There's a lot of pieces to like this whole buy-in compliance, discussion.
Chris, I can't help but think about you back when you were the our strength conditioning rehab uh, coordinator coach. To give people a sense what that is, when someone gets hurt and they have a medium or long term injury, they come down to the complex. They have physical therapists there, and then you were in the position where you were their strength coach just for the guys rehabbing, both position player and pitcher. The reason I bring that up with the whole buy-in thing, a lot of these guys that come down are, you know, actually often the guys that are hurt are older because older players get hurt more. So you've got these guys that are 29, 30, 31 or plus that may or may not have big league experience that are show up to a place they don't want to be because they have an injury they don't want. And they're in the hotel that it's a nice hotel, but it gets monotonous very fast. And they're now, okay, I've got this guy, Chris, in front of me who potentially is younger. I don't really know him yet. And the pro ball dynamic is, especially with strength conditioning stuff, is if strength coach says do box jumps and you say I don't want to do box jumps today, you're not getting fined. You're not going to say, oh, you didn't make the team, or you're going to ride the bench on Tuesday. So there's not that like authoritarian, or there's less of an authoritarian layer to it. Um, so to get buy-in that type of an environment is a strength of yours, and then also I think really prepares you for what you're doing currently.
Yeah, it was. it was an interesting like learning curve there. Like when I first stepped into the rehab role, I was not nearly as good at that as I think when I left. And I think part of that as a coach technically is understanding like how to take a principle-led approach as opposed to a methods-led approach. So like I don't care what exercise we're doing ever. I care about what adaptation we're chasing. Um, and understanding that there's a lot of roads that lead to Rome, and there's a lot of ways that you can get to that end adaptation, or at least very close. Because at the end of the day, if I get a guy stronger on a deadlift versus a barbell glute bridge versus a back squat, it's probably not going to make all that much difference as long as he gets stronger. And we're talking like lower body strength as a general adaptation. Like those exercise selections aren't the most important thing in the world. It's the adaptation, and then whatever exercise I prescribe, it's making sure the athlete does them with consistency and with intent. That's what's going to make the difference. And so, again, with those older guys specifically, listening is huge. Understanding what preferences they have. Listen to things that they're like, man, I absolutely do not want to do that. And if they have a good reason, then like I'm not going to fight it. Like, okay, let me work with you. Let's find a solution. Let's try something else out. Like, try this variation. How does that feel? Do you like that? And no, okay, let's try something else. Like nothing is set in stone. Um, and like acknowledging that, I think to some degree in the sports performance world, we give athletes far too much credit to like them understanding what they truly need versus like doing what they want to do. Two very different things there. Um, but if you can acknowledge to the athlete, especially the older ones who have been around, that their experience to date like has some validity and their thoughts have some validity, then it opens up that conversation and you get to like have a better conversation with them. And then again, like you have to be good technically, and you have to understand what principles you're applying or chasing, um, and be able to communicate that at the level that the athlete needs, whether it's complex or like very, very pared down to like one sentence, I'm trying to get your lower body stronger. Like, and this is how we're trying to do it. So like a lot of different, like, I don't know, you can call it trying to have some feel with those guys, but showing them that one, you understand them and their individual needs and why they're in Florida, what their injury was, and then kind of painting the picture for them forward of like, here's your roadmap, here's where we need to go, here's my thoughts on like the way we're trying to take it. And some guys, you can get very detailed with that conversation and give them a lot of input. Other guys, it's like you just kind of show it to them and then turn it away and say like, hey, this is where we're going. Like, I know you don't really care, but I still want to show you anyways. And then they may or may not be like, good, great, or like, I don't like that. I'm like, okay, I'll change that, and I'll come back and we'll just kind of go do your program. Or like, there's the guy that sits down at your computer with you and you like talk through an entire day of training and you tweak this and you tweak that. So there's just like a lot of different ways that conversation and relationship can be built.
It's the art of coaching.
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously understand the baseball coaching side of it because you played and you've been around it, but it's really not any different. Your task of strength coach is different from, say, hitting coach, but I wrote down like hitting drills, the method versus principle. Is it my favorite drill that's part of my dogma, or I've got a name for it, or is it just we're trying to get this better, and who cares what it looks like?
Right. Yeah. Oh man, I just lost my train of thought. I hate when that happens on podcasts. Um,
It happens, man, especially when you go for a while.
yeah,
You know,
it does.
Dwayne and I go through that where maybe not lose our train of thought because we're not the ones speaking for the majority of it, but like after the person goes, sometimes like Dwayne and I will jump it and be like, I got something here, we'll just go, like we'll be aggressive. And then sometimes it's like, I might have something, or like, I don't know, maybe Dwayne will say something, then we don't. We all kind of sit here and we're like, you guys want to take a break?
Yeah. No, if it comes back to me, I'll think of it.
That's
But
all good.
it was something along the lines of like kind of having your playbook that you pull from, but then like I don't know. I think the art of coaching is one, building relationships, but like also to like a responsible degree, like not getting reckless, but like being able to drop a play in the sand,
Yeah.
like on the fly. Like, give me a stick. All right, here we're gonna draw some X. You're gonna go this way. You're gonna go this way. Like you can kind of draw that analogy to strength and conditioning. Like I love to try exercises on myself before I hand them to a player. Like especially if it's something that I'm just kind of like thinking like, "Ooh, how would this work?" But sometimes, I'll have a guy do like a slight tweak to a movement, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I like that." And I'm like, "All right, good, do that. We're gonna stick with that."
You got to tell the human centipede drill story.
Oh, what
You
was?
remember that? You did it. You were covering. It was last year. Yeah.
What were they doing? Were they running?
Yeah, the pitcher's running after throwing or something.
Were they running around the turf? Is
No,
that what
but
I
you
had
had
them do?
staggered. They were on the side by field 1 and 2, and they were like 10 yards apart, and they had to chase each other.
Oh yeah, it was a sprint drill.
Yep.
And we had guys staggered like on every 5 yard line, but there were like 12 of them in a row, and they were all running in one line. And so you're basically just trying to catch the guy in front of you. And I think I coined it the human centipede, and they loved it.
You pulled that out of your ass. And you were so excited. You came over. I'm like walking between fields. I got like bag over my shoulder, and it's hot out. I'm sweating, and you just come up. You're all like giddy, and I think I was sick.
You
So I
probably
just
looked over and you're like, "What the hell is going on over there?"
well
And so
have
was
a
probably
chance to
everybody else at the complex.
because you ran over, and you're like, why are there? There's like a bunch of late 20s something, early 30s pitchers that are normally pretty pissed. They're like chasing each other like kids, and Chris is coming over to me all giddy, like, "Hey, I made this drill called the human centipede."
Yeah, that's an
Uh,
example of it. Again, like we're trying to get just some straight line sprint acceleration exposures, but like that was a play drawn up in the sand that just came to me on the fly, and I was like, "We're gonna do this, and they're gonna think it's funny, or at least I
Yeah.
am. I don't care if they
You
think it's funny. This is for my own personal enjoyment."
you gotta love that aspect of what we get to do, whether it's as coaches or for you with strength and conditioning. That it never leaves that childhood like interest and playfulness. Is that aspect is still so fun and interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think the more you can kind of incorporate play into the work, like it just keeps things loose. Especially that rehab setting gets really, really, really monotonous for the guys. Especially if you're a surgical guy who's there for 8 to 12 plus months, and it's like Groundhog's Day. And so like anything I can do, like you're basically living the same week over and over again with the way that things are structured, with like maybe slight tweaks or progressions from week to week, but largely like they look pretty much the same. And so it's like, how can I just like provide any sort of enjoyability or like flair to what we're doing to keep you engaged and not have you hating your life while you're here.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tough environment in that sense. It's easy to fall into that as a coach because I did it with you for a couple of years, and it's easy to be okay. Today we're going to come and he's doing this, he's doing this. I know what I'm doing. Afterwards, I'm going to lift, and then you just kind of get in the rut, and you can get bored with it, and the players will feed off of that.
Yeah.
So to bring in and be like, "Oh, we're try some new drill or do something fun," it really makes a big difference.
Yeah, and just knowing that you have the potential to pull things like that, or like you said, draw those lines in the sand, come up with those things on the fly too, can probably add to somebody's excitement for going to get to work with you. Starting to move into working with a team specifically. Like I mentioned earlier, our strength and conditioning coach over at my second school, it was just like energy factory. So when that time comes, and I'm sure that your players have had this kind of experience with you now. It got me pumped up to go and work with them. So it's, what's that dynamic like with your players now? Like, are there times? I'm sure there's times where it's like, oh shit, we got to do this. This is gonna be tough, and I'm gonna be sore after. And then I'm sure there's times where it's like, dude, we're going to get with Chris right now. This is gonna be fun. Like, I'm sure that energy can be up, which is cool too.
Yeah, you've got to be like I've heard the term like a social chameleon. Like you've got to be able to put yourself into different kind of mindsets or like energies, and and Kyle can attest to this. I am not like the rah-rah strength and conditioning coach who is like smashing a bang off of his head and wearing like a cutoff in 30 degrees. Like that's not me. So like I would do horrible in the football world. I acknowledge that, but I think that just like it lends itself well to the sport of baseball. But you've got to be able to like read the room and understand like what buttons to push at times. So an example I'll give is sometimes after practice, guys will come in and we'll have a lift after practice for the position players, and our practices are, you know, in season not as bad, but like they're dense. They're pretty, high effort, high volume. So then coming into the weight room post practice is not always the guy's favorite things. And sometimes it's like less about me trying to pump them up and like get in there, hand them their sheets, like go over to the music and just turn on. They love Young Boy here. I think it's trash, but like you just turn on Young Boy and put it on full volume and just let it rip. Like there's times where that it just calls for that, and you have to understand when that is. Or there's times where it's like two pitchers who their throwing schedule just calls for a lift on a day off, and they come in to get some optional stuff done. But it's not like it needs to be anything crazy, and we go in and we like listen to Bob Marley while they're lifting. Yeah. So you kind of have to like play with the ebbs and flows. You're kind of like a DJ of sorts, where you're turning the dial up at the right time, you're turning it down, slowing things down at the right times. I think it's something I can get better at because in the professional world, there's with it being a full-time job, guys are around the complex or the field that they're at like a lot. If we have a 6 p.m. game at an affiliate, guys are rolling in typically around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and so they're spending a pretty good amount of time at the field and then the game. And that kind of happens here on game day too, but I think like in the professional setting, it allows for like a lot more just ebbs and flows throughout the day versus, and you're kind of in and out of the locker room or in and out of the hitting cage, or just to how, however it's set up. And here I might not see them all day. And so like I have to like kind of gauge that right when they walk in and decide kind of like what direction we're going to go. But again, I kind of lost my train of thought with that.
No,
But the story, the moral of the story is like you've got to be able to read the people and read the room and adjust yourself to it, and then not just be like the bang the head on the wall guy, because that can get old at times too. But it can also get old like if you're the low energy guy who's like, all right, come and get your work done.
Is that something that you realize just in that you're coming to discover just in your professional career? I'm sure that, being like playing on sports teams your whole life, you kind of see that sometimes the team requires you to be a certain way, whether it's through some sort of verbiage or actions, like your those skills, because again, like you're so well spoken and knowledgeable in what it is that you do, which, for somebody like myself, I have a deep appreciation for, and I'm sure your athletes do as well. But the whole social aspect of that, you said that you're not the guy who's crushing the bang off your head or anything like that. So where is it that you sort of learn those things, witness those things? Was there, certain moments where a coach would behave a certain way growing up, or was it just through a lot of it was it through your professional experience, your experience working with teams, kind of a combination?
Yeah, I think starting with like growing up, and this is outside of baseball, and like I was kind of a nerdy kid also. So I got along with like a lot of different cliques throughout school. Like I was in National Honor Society, I was in Spanish Honor Society in high school, and like a lot of those kids like were not on a lot of the sports teams, but like I'm still really good friends with a lot of them. Like in sixth, seventh grade, I was on the math team at school just because I was good at math and gave me something to do. But like some of my friends in that are like some of my like really good friends still to this day. And when I go back home and like see them, like we pick up like we left off in like AP chemistry class or something. But then I also hung out with like the jocks and the athletic kids, and it's a very different crowd, and like, you have different conversations with those people, and life is different. And again, that even, took me through college where, I had the baseball team and I had my school people and they were very different. Like it's kind of like an overlapping like Venn diagram. Like they definitely had shared interests within both groups, but then like separate things that I enjoyed about both groups where I could kind of get that fix from either one. And so that just kind of helped me understand how to like develop relationships with different types of people. So more extrovert, more introvert, more, athletically driven, more, cerebral thinking. And there's all sorts of different ways that you can slice that. Um, in college, when I was hurt, I kind of became like the team hype guy for a little bit. So like I have served that role. Um, and I can't remember. We used to like we would get a lot of ladybugs around our field for some reason, and people would like collect them in their pockets. And it became a thing before games where I would get a monster and we would shotgun it. So you like open the hole with the key, and then people would dump their ladybugs into it, and I would shotgun it in front of the team in the dugout before the game, and everybody would go crazy. So I have served that role in my life.
When
It's
you were
wild.
saying that about the guy who's going to crush a bang over his forehead, I was like, but that's something Chris would do.
It's something I can do, right? Like,
You got that gear. He's got
yeah,
that gear.
yeah, I can throttle it up, and again, I'm sure, and even like I'm not the guy who's gonna like scream and yell at a group of players if they're not doing like what they need to be doing, unless it's becoming a pattern, and trying to talk to them and have professional conversations isn't working. I'm sure Kyle saw me get on a group here or there. Like I remember one time like blowing up a group of Dominican pitchers because they were not listening while we were doing our running, and I just sent them inside and like blew them up. And I went and found them in the locker room afterwards, and we had a good conversation. I'm like, hey, like that's just not the expectation. And so you just have to be able to like play with those different gears at different times. And I think I've had coaches throughout the past that have kind of served all those roles, like the very calm, collected, um, like stoic coaches, and then those who are just like up everybody's ass all the time, and everything in between. And you kind of learn like there are positives to each style, and there's probably drawbacks to each style, and I try and just pull from the positives of those and play with them at the right times.
Yeah, that stuff definitely goes a long way, and because I like your players, especially a college baseball player at the level that we're talking about right now. Even at lower levels, they're not going and talking about their strength coach all the time, and there's definitely been some praise for yourself in the program that you're at right now, which for me personally like is super 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 impressive, and I commend you for those kinds of things. So I just wanted to highlight those like where did that come from, and what's that experience been like for you, because to me it's so cool to see the like I get so pumped up when you see players getting excited about somebody like yourself that serves the kind of role, and it speaks volumes to the type of person that you are and the way that you get through to these athletes. I'm sure that means a lot to you personally, that you have that kind of respect, and that your players feel like there's, because again, man, like we've all been there. You've had some serious injuries, whether it's something physical, something mental. It's a grind, dude. This sport that we play is a freaking grind. And the fact that these guys feel prepared for this season, you definitely have to take an immense amount of pride that they feel that you have a hand in that.
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, like they're the ones that entrusted me and then put in the work. But I think it helps being a little bit younger. I could still, have fun and joke around and, like laugh and hang out. And especially my office looks out into the gym on one side and looks out into our batting cages on the other side. So if there's nobody in the gym and I've got nothing going on, I'm going to go out there and hang out with a group of guys who are just hitting, and we'll just kind of hang out, chop it up. Um, I almost probably walk that line too much between like friend and coach at times, and probably sometimes need to pull myself more into like the coaching realm for the times when I do have to dial up the seriousness, or things like that. Probably something I need to work on. But that ability to kind of blend those two, and kind of blur that line a little bit, I think is part of what helps drive that relationship with them. But at the end of the day, they've got to do the work, and then when they do the work, and I do my job by giving them a decent enough program, good things happen, and then they see good things happen, and then they want to do more good things, and
Hmm.
it just spirals forward.
Also, balancing or walking that line of coach and friend or um, where you are plays a huge role. So like if you're in the gym, then this is our environment. There's an expectation here. But when you're like, or if you're out of practice, you're warming them up. You're there to assist. But if they're like some guys just doing some extra work in the cage and you're around, like having like like Chris strength coach is here and it's just like he's supporting us. He thinks this is cool what we're doing. Like it's I think you can do both. It just depends on the context.
Right. I agree 100%. I just think, again, this is me looking at myself and saying, what do I need to do better? I think I do. At times I blur that too much. And like, I don't know, maybe call it drawing boundaries or whatnot. But I think there are times when like that can be better on my end. That's something I think about in terms of like, how do I get better as a coach? Like that's one area.
Yeah.
Um, I think I do a good job of building that relationship and giving those guys the input and autonomy that they need, and also, you know, let them be themselves. But at the same time, then uh, there's probably a few instances where I haven't upheld like the focus in a group as well as I should have at one point, and let it get too far to where a session might have not got wasted, but wasn't up to the expectation. And the problem is like if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. And then the next time when they're like that, and you come down and try and be a little bit more serious, they're like, "The hell? Like we were just like this the other day." And
Yeah.
so, like again, it's a slippery slope once you start to give that control up. So just something like for myself and a lot of coaches who are of that more laid back style, like I am, just something to be aware of.
Yeah. Well, when you're going to get into the area of leveling with your athletes and earning their trust, that line is just it's going to be towed. If you're somebody who cares about your athletes and wants to show some sort of expression to the fact that you care about them, you're going to deal with those kinds of issues. And I think it's always important to be critical of ourselves as coaches, as strength coaches, as baseball coaches, and as mentors to these guys that that's going to happen. And it's important, I think, to be critical and to always look to improve in those areas.
Yeah, it's also a new environment.
Hmm.
Like you haven't coached in college at this stage yet, so uh, there's certain things that you probably make assumptions coming from pro ball that help, and then other things don't. And kind of like as you alluded to, once you've gone through a full cycle, a full year, you'll have you can look back and highlight, hey, this went really well, so it's really, and this is why. So we really have to dig in here. And then there's other times where it's um, hey, it's something I want to change. Just you could communicate expectations ahead of time, having gone through it, once or twice.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's going to be definitely a reflection period after the season, and a review, just a self review of like what went well, what do we need to do better, where are we lacking, where can we spend more time or resources better. That'll for sure happen, both in terms of just like the X's and O's, but also the intangible or like the soft skill side of things.
Yeah. And
Sure.
then you might even have some of your athletes that you've had from this year. When you get new guys next year, it won't just be trust me, bro. It'll be trust him, bro. You
Right.
know?
Yeah. Then hopefully that carries some weight. Luckily, again, we only have 12 players on the roster this year who played at least one inning for us last year in terms of or because of the transfer portal and the draft. And I think we've had 23 guys drafted in the last 2 years, so like a lot of turnover on the roster. But with all the freshmen and transfers coming in, at least there were no expectations of like this is how it's going to be, which allowed a pretty clean slate for me, which I was lucky. But yeah, next year the returners will know the expectations, and I'll be able to lean on some of those guys who have been around to kind of help uphold those as well.
So at the time of this recording, today is February 21st. So you guys are just a couple games into the year. I've also really liked you've posted on your social media. It'll just be like a story of the game. You just put W next to it, and I've seen a couple of those, and I'm just like I'm looking for a lot.
Yeah.
Uh,
You've seen four of
but
them, and hopefully more. Yeah, I take our social media team just a note on that. Like we'll post. They post like 12 times during the game on Instagram, but usually there'll be like one final post with like the final score and then some pictures, and I just take whichever picture was my favorite moment from the game. That's really, and then I just put a W.
That's cool. So, I mean, where I'm getting at with this is by the time people are listening, you guys are already in your season, but it's still pretty early for you guys. You are in an environment now, like you said at the beginning, where it's win now, it's win today. How do we beat the opponent now? Um, which is, it brings a different sense of investment into, the players and the team's success. So, it's got to be exciting, man. To,
It is. There's no place in college baseball like the box and the atmosphere that it brings, and I still haven't seen it like it's teeth fully showing. Like, when we have some SEC night Friday games, like I'm sure it's going to be crazy. But yeah, I even get like this sense of like, man, I just want to go kick somebody's teeth in. Like when we go and like when we're getting ready for a game, like I get those juices. Like, man, I just want to go like beat up on somebody today. And I hope I can deliver that to the players because baseball is again one of those sports where you gotta get in the ebbs and the flows of the season and it's still new and fresh enough where it's like every day is an exciting day to go compete. But what happens when, we have a midweek game against a local mid-major team after playing like a weekend series against Tennessee at home? Like, how do we get up for that Tuesday game and show up ready to beat somebody's ass? Like that's what I'm like I try to help instill on game day and like I just try to make sure everybody's in the right frame of mind the best I can.
I think the social chameleon sort of analogy that you drew earlier is definitely something to take into consideration when going from that weekend series to the Tuesday game, kind of being in the role that you see that you need to be in the moment.
that that environment. I haven't experienced it, but a guest we had a few episodes ago, Pat Cantwell, he played at Stony Brook in 2012, which was the same year that Kent went to
Yeah.
Omaha. So he was walking us through his story. I mean, very similar. You weren't at Kent yet, but similar type programs where really really good team, but in a conference in a location that wouldn't suggest it, and go on this Cinderella run. They went through LSU to get to
Yeah.
Omaha in the Super Regional. And he was talking about, he's like, yeah, we got off the bus and there was like a sea of people tailgating for our practice. They're like they were tailgating for our practice before the thing started, and he was like, guys had he said someone had a gas powered blender to make margaritas for everyone. It was just, I was like, that is
It's sick.
something else.
Yeah, the tailgating scene here is pretty unmatched. It's funny because on Saturdays in the fall, like when we have a football game, obviously huge tailgating scene, but even for call it like a 6:30 p.m. game, we'll have usually a practice or a scrimmage on that Saturday. So I'll get into the field probably at like 7:30 or 8 because we try and go somewhat early to get guys done, and we have recruits in town, so they've got stuff to do with them. But there are people like popped up with tents and they use our parking lot for tailgating. Like there's tents popped up and people grilling like as I'm pulling up at 8 a.m. for a 6:30 p.m. game and they're going.
Damn.
That's a full
I
day.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And he did also compliment the fans over at LSU when Stony Brook won and got out of there that they were at I forget the way he described it, Kyle. It was like
Gracious loser, I think he
yeah,
said, or
like
something.
yeah, like prideful in victory and gracious in defeat or something to that aspect, and that they I think he said there was a motorcade, right, that went over to Omaha, and there was a bunch of LSU people that had like Stony Brook mini flags on their motorcycles and were supporting them in their run in Omaha too, which was cool. It was
Yeah,
cool to
it's
hear
really
that
cool
that's the kind of fan base that you
Yeah,
guys have over there.
it's a very culturally rich place.
for sure.
Oh man, so you guys are you had mentioned you guys have a game later,
Yeah, we play
correct?
at 4 p.m. today.
Excellent. Who are you playing against?
We got Nebraska Omaha this weekend.
Nice. Cool. So I know you have to get going pretty soon. So we'll start to wrap this up. Chris or Dwayne, is there anything else that you guys wanted to bring up while we still have you?
Again, I wanted to say that, well, not again, but I did want to say that I appreciate you coming on the pod and talking. I felt like me personally, I learned a lot. It was cool to hear your story, your movement from athletics into college baseball and into what you're doing now. And it's awesome to know that you're the kind of person that these players are looking to make these kinds of adjustments and chase down their dreams of having a competitive Division One experience and possibly, getting to the next level as well. So it's good to know that these guys have somebody like yourself in their corner.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. KB, I appreciate you reaching out and setting this up. Dwayne, it's been awesome meeting you, talking
Yeah.
to you. Yeah, just really enjoyed it.